Welcome to Multi-Studio Mastery, a show where we nerd out on studio growth, leadership, and operational excellence in boutique fitness. I'm your host, Tessa Thomas, co-founder of Pipeline Solutions. We work behind the scenes with studio owners and operators to streamline back-end chaos, improve retention, and scale sustainably. On this podcast, I sit down with industry leaders, multi-studio owners, and operators in the thick of it, so we can unpack what's really working and what's just noise. If you're building a stronger, smarter studio, you're in the right place. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Multi-Studio Mastery. Today I am joined by Seran Glanfield, founder of Spring 3 and host of the award-winning Pilates Business Podcast. She is a leading business coach and consultant to boutique fitness studio owners around the world. With over a decade of hands-on experience, Seran has mastered the growth and development of hundreds of studios, becoming the go-to expert for those looking to scale their studios, transforming them into sustainably profitable, streamlined businesses. That is the perfect person for what we talk about here. So welcome, Seran. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, 100%. I would love to talk a little bit about your background because I think it's pretty unique. And if you could kind of take us back, I think maybe it was 2011 or 2012, somewhere around that time, or maybe a little bit before, but you were previously in, the banking world and kind of got into Pilates and then, the business of boutique fitness. But I'd like to go back to kind of that time and what drew you to the space and kind of how your career path kind of changed.
The twists and turns along the way, for sure. Yeah. So my career, I worked on the trading floor at one of the large banks. I traded commodities. So it was a very fast paced, intense, aggressive environment, long hours. I was at the office at 6 a.m., didn't leave until 9 p.m. And I did that for a while in London. And then I was transferred to the New York office where it was even more intense and even more sort of an aggressive environment. And at that time, I was beginning to think about how long I could keep this up for.
Yep.
And a friend of mine had introduced me to Pilates. She said, you need to go to this class. And I went along and I was like, wow, this is not like anything I had ever done before. I'd always been a runner. I'd done a couple of half Ironman triathlons, so I was super active. I thought I was, super fit. And then, of course, Pilates is so incredibly humbling. And so
for everybody,
yes. No matter what, still is actually.
100%.
And so, I kind of was thinking about the long-term, bigger picture. And I just felt like I kind of could stick it out and suck it up and keep working these long hours, or I could take a bit of a change in direction. And, I'd always really enjoyed business and marketing. And that's kind of where, I love all that. That's what I would read about in my spare time. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's me.
Not to me, but I get it.
Right. And so I decided to take some time to spend a bit more time learning about Pilates. I did a bit more of it at the weekend and where I could squeeze it in anywhere I could. And eventually I was like, I think I want to I need to take a break from that world. It was a good timing to do that. And with the idea that I might go back or I might see where this takes me. And so I threw myself into a 1,000+ hour teach training program in Pilates in New York City. And I kind of committed to it I committed to it like I committed to my prior career, which means that I was showing up at the studio at 6:30 and I was there all day long and I was soaking up every single tiny piece of information I could about Pilates and teaching and everything else. And I absolutely loved it. I never expected to love it as much as I did. I learned a lot in that time of my life because I'd gone from an incredibly structured, intense, aggressive environment to an environment that was unstructured and a lot more about feelings. And, over the course of those years I taught in New York, my friends who were also teachers and studio owners would talk about business and clients and pricing and that studio that's opening down the street. And how is it that, SoulCycle can charge that much money for a group class? And that was just beginning we were starting to see the growth of the boutique fitness industry at that stage. And so we were talking about all of this. And eventually some of these people came to me and said, look, I can't just keep taking you for coffee. Let's make this more formal. So they were like, can I pay you to be sort of a consultant to to me. And so I was like, this is amazing. My dream job. I would love that. And so that really evolved. And, I moved back to London for a period of time, and I worked with some of the leading names in boutique fitness at that time in London very, very closely, and supported them with significant expansion in terms of locations and creating that structure. And, now today I've supported hundreds of studio owners around the world and growing their boutique fitness studio businesses and brands and their in the online space and the brick and mortar space. I love what I do, but I love most seeing these studio owners who I still speak to today from way back when we first started out, seeing their career and their businesses evolve over time, seeing it grow with them, seeing them be able to buy a business and sell their businesses and move into their next business has just been such a blessing, and it just so fulfilling.
Yeah, 100%. If you kind of go back to that time and even, of course, the work you do now, what were some of the early challenges that you would have helped, studio owners with then? And I guess how have those evolved over time?
Oh, such a good question. Okay. So when I first started, it was more of a consulting role in a very traditional sense of consulting, because there wasn't a lot of business coaches for boutique fitness studios at that time. So it was more, I called it consulting, but it was coaching, right? Mm-hmm. And a bit of both, a combination. And back then, it was really the beginnings of the boutique fitness boom that we see today. There was SoulCycle, there was Flywheel, there was some, we were seeing a little bit of yoga here and there, the boutique fitness, but there was not anywhere near as many brands or styles or options available as we see on the market today. And it was very specific to certain parts of the world too at that time. There was not Pure Bars in every single town in every single county in the US at that time. And so there was an element of, especially with bar and Pilates and some of the, I wouldn't say they're new, but they are newer modalities that didn't fit into a traditional gym setting, right? We had to sort of focus in our marketing efforts, not just on lead generation. We had to also educate and inform about what this modality does and why it's so powerful. Right. And it was a lot more about education than it was necessarily about inspiration, because those methods were less known. And in Pilates, especially back then, and to some degree still, I think the case, there was very little understanding about what the method was then. There was a lot of comparisons to yoga. And so a lot of the work that I did in the early days with my studio owners that I worked with was in developing that unique brand message, the marketing messaging, because it wasn't enough to just play with your pricing. People didn't know what they were getting. And so I spent a lot of time focusing on branding, on language, on copy, on words, on how to introduce what you do, on how to build that confidence and talk about what you do so that you're conveying the right information to get people excited about what you do. Yeah. Now, today, it's still somewhat the case, except we don't have to explain what Pilates is. People have a sense for what it is. They know it's different to yoga, right? But what the world that we're in today is that there is almost so much out there. And the same now is true for, a bar or a movement class of any sort that we see that is some in that sort of world. There's a lot of crossover, is that you cannot label what you do. You have to be able to describe it in a way that distinguishes you, but is also really compelling and that resonates with that ideal client, that niche that is the perfect fit for your studio. And so although we're a slightly different emphasis on exactly what we're talking about, the same kind of pattern is there in that you cannot ignore, in my opinion, knowing what it is that makes your business unique and being able to share that and showcase that with your community in order for them to get excited and sit up and take notice.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Kind of to follow up on that thread, do you have maybe one or two exercises or frames? Like how could someone think about what makes them or their brand different?
I take people through these exercises inside of the programs when we work together, and it is so powerful to take the time. And it's also, I think, so challenging that it's also the work that's often avoided. Yes. And so too often, I think we find it's too easy to skip over it and go straight to, well, we've got this equipment, look how pretty our studio is, And, this is how long our classes are. And that might get you quite a long way, actually, if you're really, really good at that.
Right.
But if there is not a sort of a set of core values and a core philosophy that binds you and your clients together, what ultimately ends up happening is that you see this higher level of churn, or you have long-term retention issues.
Right.
And so you get a lot of people coming in, they stick around for maybe 6 weeks, 3 months, maybe even 5, but then they're on to that next thing because they don't have a deep connection to your studio. And so when I do this with my studio owners, there's a series of exercises and questions I ask them to answer and think very deeply about. And it's really incredibly eye-opening for them to be able to take the time to think about that. Right. And ultimately, the outcomes of those set of questions feeds into your value proposition and what you deeply care about. And for the most part, I would say 99% of the studio owners that I am fortunate to work with, they come into this wanting to make an impact on their clients' lives. They're not showing up because they just want to make $1 million. They're showing up because they genuinely love movement. They've always loved movement. They love seeing what it does for people and in their lives, and they want to share that with others. And so it's about capturing that essence of that energy and what they show up for in words, which is actually quite hard because especially if you're in the English language, it's actually a terrible language to describe. We have very few words actually to be able to use. There's not that many. Like, it makes you feel good is...
not quite
getting there.
Not quite there.
So we have to get pretty creative with how we introduce your business and your brand, and how we introduce also that set of values and philosophy, and really what it is that drives you to open your doors every single day and why they should show up. It's a combination of really thinking about what you deeply care about for your clients, the outcomes you want for them, and what your values are, because typically any boutique fitness business is somewhat an extension. I say any business is somewhat an extension of the leader of the business. And so your values probably transfer into the values of the business to some degree, if not completely. And so capturing all of that, but then of course to have a strong brand statement or mission statement is one thing, right? But it's not typically all that usable when it comes to marketing. And so then it's about taking that brand message and integrating it throughout the customer journey and the marketing funnel so that you are maximizing lead generation, you are maximizing conversions at every point, and then you are maximizing retention as well.
It's incredible how we can get kind of disconnected from that why, that initial just seed of like why, you started this thing.
And especially as you grow, I think this is always, sometimes there's a challenge that some founders are very aware of, and sometimes it just does get lost. When I think you can build with your brand intact and your brand can grow with your business because you perhaps have woven it through the client experience and you've trained your team well and you're emphasizing that across all of your marketing efforts, then that is going to create a more stable and solid and sustainable business.
And speaking of, scaling or that growth, it sounds like from your perspective, and I definitely agree. So the brand is a key part of that. If you're going to be, opening multiple locations or growing a concept, what are the other kind of key signals that you look for that tell you that this group, this person, this concept is ready for scaling or maybe not ready yet?
Well, it's two things, I think. Number one is the data has to show it, right? So you know that. And I love data and we need those numbers to look good. We need them to look real good. And I think it's one thing to do it once. And I think it's another thing to do it twice, but it's quite another to do it 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times.
Yes.
And so we want to make sure that whatever you will learn something new and different every time you open a location. And it's about having an approach as a leader that takes what you've learned and being willing to apply that to that next phase and knowing that it is still, even though you've done it maybe once or twice before, it will still be different.
Right.
And when you have the data, you will be more informed than without it. You want to have the data and you have to have the mindset. When I see people who grow their businesses really sustainably and are successful, and by successful, I mean their business is generating a very nice level of not just revenue, but also profit, right? So revenue is
Yes.
one thing. We can all make a lot of money in terms of top line, but how much are you taking home at the end of the day? That's
Absolutely.
also really important. And so when you grow with that in mind, you are tracking those numbers, because ultimately business is a numbers game. And if you're able to interpret those numbers effectively and you know what the numbers are telling you, then you know where to put your efforts, you know where to invest more money, you know where the gaps are and what might be holding you back. And you also know the potential of your business as well.
If you're listening and thinking, okay, this is what I need to get a better handle on my operations, then go grab the free Studio Operations Toolkit. It's packed with plug and play resources for improving retention, boosting member value, and tightening up your operational backend all in one place. You'll find the link in the show notes, so go ahead and grab it, and let's get back to the episode. I'd love to go a little bit deeper in talking about the team. What makes or breaks a great culture, and how do you attract those high performers into what you're doing?
Your team is so important to invest in. As a leader, you have to be that role model to them in how they interact with clients, in the experience you want it to deliver. And if that is not part of the onboarding or the training for that team, for every single person on your team, then it should be. And I think the earlier you can begin to implement regular and consistent training, not just onboarding, but consistent ongoing training with your team on your client experience in your studio, the stronger your business will be. And so very often studios will bring a teacher in, they'll train them in their whatever they do, however they do it in that onboarding. And then, you just show up to class and teach, and great, see you later. There's not an ongoing, I should say, consistent sort of check-in or making sure that certain standards are met. And that is really important for a business as you grow, whether you're going from 2 to 3 to 4 studios. And that is really about having that structure behind the scenes. And team management is about having structure, clear structure and transparent structure as to who's responsible for what and what you are responsible for as a team player. And that means that when you go to hire someone, you're hiring someone because you're looking for someone who is willing and has the ability to step into that role, not just because of their skills and their talent for teaching, but also that they have the right character and attitude that is going to fit really nicely in your business. But often we're on the back foot with hiring. Often I find studios are just trying to, any human being that can teach, come on in, open door, quick, 8-hour, whatever it is, 4-hour training, or even just like, oh, you've taught this before. Okay, get out there. I need you on the schedule. And so what happens then is that client experience, without training, the client experience standard, the quality drops. And without any sort of structure or process in place to improve it or to catch that early on, you see a decline in class attendance. You see people talking about perhaps a bad experience, which is terrible for your business. And you see, as a leader of your business, you get frustrated with a teacher or 2 or 3, and you can't let them go because you need the people to teach. And so it creates this really not such a great atmosphere and energy in the business.
I like to think of it as well, to your point. I can't remember exactly where I heard this, so someone can provide the attribution at some point. But your team members are like your internal members, right? We do all of these things for our studio members. We're tracking their visits, we're tracking their sales, we're tracking their milestones. We know when they're in, we know when they're away on holiday, we know their kids' names, we know their pets' names. And then you come to your team, and how many classes has Mike coached? I don't know. I think he started last November. I'm not entirely sure. It's kind of telling, right? That we have kind of this revolving door with staffing in the space, because I think there's a bit of a gap there in all of the things that we need to also pour into our team.
When you've got the system and the structure in place, it creates a better sense of flow. And as you grow, ideally it's not you who is doing all of this, right? You have others around you who also are participating in that structure in the business. And so you may have a lead instructor who's involved in checking in with the team member, or a studio manager who's involved in doing a team meeting and team training on a regular basis, and talking about, customer or client experience and updates on what's happening in the studio. And so everyone's informed. So it's not necessarily always you, but you probably have to initiate the infrastructure that supports that.
Okay. I have a fun little lightning round for you, if you're up for it, to kind of wrap up. I know. Now we got to
switch gears. Here we go.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's get ready. So there's a couple of fun little questions for you. So one business book every studio owner should read.
My favorite is The Gap and the Gain. Is very eye-opening about where you put your focus. Do you know it?
Dr. Ben Hardy, I think.
Yes.
The Gap and the Gain, right? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
Like it a lot.
Favorite place you've traveled for work or fun?
Work. Okay. So I've been in all over different conferences and different places, but I did there was a Pilates conference once in the south of France in Nice. And that was quite nice.
Yeah. Most rewarding moment in your work with studio owners. So I guess that could be a category or any moment that stands out for you.
Many of my studio owners I would say 99.9% women who often embark on their business journey in their late 20s, early 30s. And this often also coincides when they're settling down and starting a family. And it is really fulfilling to be able to support women through that journey, that period in their life, that season of their life, as they are wanting to take time out of their business to be at home with their newborn babies, or taking time off to go on their honeymoon. And then knowing that they are going to have a business to come back to that is still going to be growing and thriving because they have been working on it in the right way. And I work with women who also are caregivers for their parents, taking care of their college kids who are perhaps struggling with something. And I feel so blessed to have them in my life because they are fabulously strong, ambitious women, and being able to support them through all of these seasons that would have been such a struggle potentially if they did not have their own business that could be flexible for them, or if they were in a different type of working environment. But they have been able to continue to have an income and to build a business despite and while still being able to take the time out of the business that they want to be able to be in the other places that they want to be in their life. And to me, that I think is probably one of the most fulfilling parts about what I do.
I love that. Last question is, what are you excited about in the space? What's exciting for you in boutique fitness right now?
There is so much opportunity out there. I think when you've got the right brand message, when you are willing to learn about what's next on the marketing horizon and you're utilizing all of the different tools that you have available to you, I think there is an abundance of opportunity. And that to me is absolutely, is incredible. You're unstoppable. You can do whatever you want. You just might have to learn a new tool or a new system or new software to be able to get to tap into that next level of growth. And that is absolutely so exciting.
Amazing. Well, Seran, thank you so much for joining us today. It's an absolute pleasure to talk to you. And I'm sure everyone got quite a bit out of our conversation. So thanks so much for coming on.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Multi-Studio Mastery. If you're building a studio business you're proud of and these conversations are helping, do us a favor and leave a review. Or send this to someone else in the trenches. Every share helps more owners get insight they need to scale the right way. And don't forget, the free Studio Operations Toolkit is always available in the show notes, along with other resources we've mentioned today. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you next time.